Alert. That's right, folks. This morning, an actual alert. Is there a trigger event coming? Let's talk about it. Welcome to Prepper Nation. I'm John. Thank you very much for being here this morning. Coming to you from the $1 billion bunker. That's right, son. $1 billion worth right here. So let's get straight into it. I think this is alert worthy. A lot of times you'll see alert, big caps, all caps, and it leads to nothing. But this could lead to nothing, but I think that it could be something. And it's really something that people aren't keyed in on, they're not paying attention to, and I think they should be. So this Friday, a group of countries called the Weimar Triangle, three countries, they are scheduled to meet, and they are scheduled to meet and talk about the path forward when it comes to Ukraine, all of the craziness that's taking place between Russia and Ukraine right now. What is the viable path forward? Let me name these three countries off: Germany, Poland, and France. Who's been paying attention this week here at Prepper Nation? What do those three countries have in common? Germany, Poland, and France. Just to rehash very quickly, Germany was caught scheming against Russia. Publicly they're saying we don't want any involvement. Privately, they're having conversations at the very top of the food chain in terms of their military, and they're wargaming how to hit infrastructure in Russian territory. So, blatantly they're talking, they're double speaking. Then Poland and France have both went against NATO, and they've went on record and they've said, we may at some point have put boots on the ground. France was the first to say it. I covered that over here at Prepper Nation. I said they're going to get waxed unless they have help. NATO called the president of France. The next thing you know, he's walking it back. He's saying, well, I meant in support roles. You know what I mean? Poland then went on record and said, we can't rule it out. We cannot rule out boots on the ground, because whether they believe it or not, or whether it's just a story that they're telling people, the propaganda that they're feeding to Western nations or not, they're claiming that Russia's not going to stop with Ukraine. And there's this big fear that Russia's going to continue to swoop across Europe and try and take all of Europe, maybe reestablish, the USSR. At least that's what we're being told out in public again. They seem to say one thing in public and another thing behind closed doors, especially Germany. So that's why this is significant. These three countries are really the ones that are considering going rogue against NATO and taking matters into their own hands, or they seem to have that disposition where they are, I don't know, they're tired of the proxy war. They're ready to escalate things. Now, war is dirty. It's dirty business. It could be that these three are being coached into this by NATO. Who knows? But that's a rabbit hole I'm not going to go down this morning. So check it out. Since the invasion of Ukraine, Ukrainian aid surpasses $278 billion. These are countries coming to the aid of Ukraine. Most of them are NATO countries. This includes weapons. This includes supplies, training. This includes, everything. MREs, bullets, artillery shells. This is paying for, as we were just talking about a couple of days ago, this is paying for the retirement of some of the government officials in Ukraine as well, which to me is ridiculous, but I digress. And we're often mad about it here in the United States. I know I am, at least. Raise your hand if you're mad. I'm often mad about it because we continue. There's another spending package, which we'll talk about at some other point, but we just continue to see these spending packages and money that we really don't have being shipped over there. And as mad as we are, we have to understand the top three countries that are donating. So, of course, number one is the United States. We know this. Very significant here. Number two, Germany. Germany so far has given $24.2 billion. France is number three, $17.4 billion. Now, this seems like, these are lowball numbers compared to the United States. But again, the gross domestic product of Germany and France pales in comparison to the United States. So they are sending a lot of their wealth over as well under the direction of NATO. And quite frankly, I think they're tired of doing it. I think that they see the writing on the wall at this point, that they cannot continue to fund a forever proxy war. If we continue to send money and say we don't want any part of this, no boots on the ground, Ukraine, you go, rah, 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 and we'll support you financially, this is a 20-year war, maybe a 25-year war. And I think the United States has a bad habit of supporting these sorts of wars and conflicts, but I think Germany and France and Poland have gotten really tired of it. They've gotten really tired of just shipping wealth over to Ukraine. Germany and France, again, in particular, because they're the number two and the number three financiers of this. NATO is stacked on Poland's border. Okay. This costs money. Every single day, think about how much money it costs to house the troops that are there, to feed the troops that are there, to pay for the fuel, to move equipment back and forth. It's costing a lot of money for us just to be there on standby, meaning NATO when I say us, okay? And, on top of this, again, we continue to send war chest money that these countries really don't have, the United States included, to Z-Man. Look, the economy here, regardless of what they say, I don't think it's doing well here in the United States. And I take a look at Germany and I take a look at France and I look at their economy. They're not doing so well either. And I think it's finally catching up to them. They're looking at the proxy war in Ukraine. And honestly, folks, it's been back and forth. It was back and forth for a while. But if you look at this with a critical eye, I don't care which side of the fence you're on, Russia or Ukraine, step back. Don't affiliate yourself with one side or the other for a minute. You look at $278 billion in funding, and you ask yourself, what have countries that are involved with NATO, what have they gained? What have they gained? They haven't beaten Russia back. In fact, Russia, I would argue, has gotten stronger because they're in this mobilization mindset, and they have been for a while now. No gains whatsoever being made by NATO, by the NATO countries. And again, I think Germany and France and Poland, I think they finally see this. I think they finally understand we can't fight for 20 years. We can't financially support a 20-year war. Quickly, if you don't mind, smash it. Smash that subscribe button if you're brand new here. And if you're subscribed, maybe shoot a thumbs up and help a brother out. It brings me back to the old expression, and I've heard it so many times. If you want something done right, you've got to do it yourself. And I think that's what this meeting is all about, because again, this meeting is between the three countries, Germany, France, and Poland. NATO's not going to be there. Okay, these are the leaders of the three countries that are on record now saying either we need to consider putting boots on the ground, or again, with Germany, they got caught with their pants down and it was released, yada, yada, yada. If you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. I think they figured out Ukraine cannot win this on their own. They have shipped them. Think about this. They said, we will never ship tanks over to Z-Man. They ship tanks to Z-Man. We will never ship aircraft, fighter jets. That's a line in the sand. We're not going to do that. They've now done that. But what's happening specifically with the tanks is Z-Man and company, they're getting stripped down versions of the Leopard tanks from Germany and the Abrams tanks from the United States. They're being gifted these tanks, but the technology by and large is being stripped out because NATO countries do not want Ukraine to have this technology. There's some important stuff in there, especially with the Abrams tanks. And Russia has countered this by saying, every piece of hardware, like in Abrams, for example, that Russian troops take out, they're putting a bounty on this stuff. And literally on social media, on Telegram and stuff, the Russian soldiers are thanking NATO and the West for sending this because they're able to double their paychecks. They're able to defeat the Leopard tanks and the Abrams because, again, they're stripped down versions. And then you look at Ukraine, they have no air power to speak of. You cannot win a war with no air power in 2024. I mean, you just can't do it. The only way that you can win a war with no air power is to make it so costly for the Russians that the Russians finally, it's not worth their time and they move out. Similar to what is usually done to the United States when we stick around for 20 years and we're like, what are we doing? The problem is, again, Russia's making gains. The Ukrainians are not. So NATO is kind of painted into a corner here. And I think these three countries, we could see more joining these three, by the way. But I think these three countries have figured out NATO is painted into a corner here. They really only have three options at this point because there was a lot of saber rattling, a lot of threatening back and forth, a lot of that kind of fiery rhetoric and rabble rousing. And it was done to make Russia back down, and Russia hasn't backed down. So we really have three options on the table at this point. If you're NATO, number one, continue to fund a losing proxy war. Make no mistake, NATO countries, the United States, yada, yada. We are in a proxy war. And make no mistake, we are losing that proxy war. NATO went in. They thought, hey, we'll hit Russia with sanctions. We will use drones. We will use superior technology, and we will defeat them in this way. And Russia went in. Their strategy was a really in-your-face, trench-to-trench, grinding conventional warfare because they had the superior numbers. They had more tanks. They had more everything, right? Russia's strategy is winning. And NATO has a huge problem because of that. And they would have to continue to fund a proxy war, knowing 20 years from now, they're still going to take the loss. All right. And again, I think these three countries have figured that out and they're not interested in that option anymore. Option number two, NATO can become the aggressor, or NATO countries in this case, put boots on the ground. The problem with this particular option, Russia has allies too. And hopefully this doesn't become a trigger event, because if Germany, Poland, and France get together and they decide, hey, we're going to go against NATO, we're going rogue here, son, and we're going to enter the war boots on the ground, we're going to put some jets in the sky, we're rolling in with everything that we have, they're bound to know that China, that North Korea, that Iran, that many enemies of the West are going to come to Russia's defense. And this powder keg goes off at that point. Okay. So if these three countries go rogue against NATO and they decide to enter in anyway, brings up an interesting conversation, right? Option number three, NATO can lay down arms and walk away. The problem with this option, and the reason I don't think we're ever going to see this one happen, is if they choose to just say, hey, we're backing off, Russia, you got us, the world begins to question, do we even need a NATO? If NATO can't win in a situation like this, why do they exist, right? And NATO understands this, so I don't think they're gonna back away. But if these three go rogue and they decide to enter, again, it does bring up several interesting questions. Okay, but the biggest is, does NATO come to their defense? If they say, you know what, we're tired of this proxy war, we're tired of this slow burn and watching our economies crumble, we're going in. As NATO members, if they go in and they start to get overwhelmed, does this pull the rest of NATO in as well? I don't know. I think this can be a trigger event. Again, this meeting is going down Friday. The Weimar Triangle, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, was established in 1991. Rarely ever do these three countries get together and meet without NATO. So it is a huge red flag for me that's going up into the air. But let me know what you think in the comments. Y'all take care and God bless.